You've probably been told it's harmless, that it's healthy, that doing it daily can help keep your body young, your mind sharp, and your stress levels down. But what if that's not the full story? What if something as private and as routine as daily masturbation is quietly reshaping your brain, draining your energy, and creating distance in your most meaningful relationships, all without you even realizing it? Hello, I'm Dr. James. For over 30 years, I've worked closely with older adults across the United States, men and women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, many of whom have come to me with silent, deeply personal questions they've carried for years. Questions about unexplained fatigue, lingering sadness, a sense of disconnection, or even quiet guilt. But rarely, if ever, did they suspect that a private habit they believed to be harmless might be playing a hidden role. Here's where it gets interesting. It's not the act itself that's the issue. It's the frequency, the emotional motivation behind it, and more importantly, what this habit starts to replace in your life over time. In today's video, we're going to look beneath the surface. You'll learn what really happens inside your brain and body when masturbation becomes a daily ritual in your later years, and what no one ever talks about until it's too late. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a conversation that could make a real difference in your health and well-being. And if this topic speaks to you, go ahead and type 1 in the comments below. If it doesn't, type 0. Your feedback helps me shape more thoughtful, relevant content just for you and others walking this path. Now that we've set the stage, let's explore what's really going on behind this everyday habit. This isn't about shame or judgment. It's about awareness. Because once you understand the full picture, you're empowered to make confident, informed decisions for your body, your mind, and your most cherished connections. The brain's reward system, hijacked by habit. I'll never forget a patient I once had. We'll call him Frank. Frank was 67, retired, widowed, and living alone. When he first came in, he described a strange mix of fatigue, irritability, and emotional flatness. "I'm not depressed, Doc," he said, "but I just don't feel anything the way I used to." He wasn't sleeping well, had lost interest in his hobbies, and had even started calling his kids less frequently. On paper, everything checked out. His heart was healthy, his blood work looked fine. Nothing pointed to an obvious medical problem. But then, after a pause, Frank looked down and quietly confessed, "I've been doing it every day, sometimes twice. It helps me sleep. Or at least, I thought it did." Frank's story is more common than you might think. Each time we climax, the brain releases a rush of dopamine, a feel-good chemical that gives us a momentary high of pleasure and relief. That in itself isn't harmful. In fact, dopamine is vital to our well-being. But here's the twist. As we age, our brains become more sensitive to routine patterns. When the same activity, like daily masturbation, triggers that dopamine hit over and over, the brain adapts. It becomes less responsive. That rush doesn't feel as good anymore. Eventually, to the things that once gave us joy, like a cup of coffee in the morning, a good laugh with a friend, or even a quiet walk at sunset, begin to feel muted. It's not because life has lost its spark. It's because the brain's reward system has been quietly hijacked. And when that system is out of balance, it doesn't just affect mood. It can alter motivation, memory, emotional resilience, even the way we connect with the people we love. People begin drifting through their days, not knowing why they feel so off. constantly chasing that next quick burst of stimulation, rather than the slower, deeper experiences that truly bring peace and meaning. And here's the hard truth. The longer this pattern continues, the more difficult it becomes to feel satisfied by life's simple, natural joys. But this isn't just a brain issue. The body, especially in our later years, can also begin sending subtle signs that something is out of balance. Let's talk about what happens physically when daily sexual stimulation becomes too frequent. Physical health, fatigue, pelvic strain, and nerve sensitivity. Let me tell you about Harold, another longtime patient of mine. Harold is 72, proud of staying active. He still plays golf twice a week and enjoys his morning walks. But during a recent visit, he told me he'd been feeling unusually tired. Not the kind of tired that goes away after a nap. He mentioned a dull ache in his lower back and occasional numbness in his groin area. At first glance, there didn't seem to be a clear cause. But with a little gentle conversation, Harold finally opened up. He'd developed a daily masturbation habit, something he leaned on more heavily since losing his wife 5 years ago. What Harold didn't realize is that daily stimulation, especially in older adults, can place subtle but consistent stress down the body. Stress that adds up over time. The pelvic floor, the group of muscles that supports your bladder, bowel, and sexual organs, naturally weakens with age. Frequent climax, without adequate rest, can fatigue these muscles further, leading to issues like urinary leakage, discomfort while walking, or even pressure in the lower back. Another concern is nerve sensitivity. The genitals contain a dense network of delicate nerve endings. Overstimulating them regularly can lead to temporary numbness, tingling, or even a reduced response to touch and pleasure. These symptoms might seem minor at first, but they're often your body's way of quietly asking for balance. And while there's a popular belief that sexual release gives older adults more energy, in many cases, the opposite is true. Overindulgence without proper recovery can lead to hormonal imbalances, lower testosterone levels in men, and overall sluggishness in both men and women. I've seen it many times. Patients who feel more tired, less motivated, and slower to bounce back after what they thought was a harmless routine. Yet they rarely connect the dots. These physical shifts I described earlier are often subtle. They don't announce themselves all at once, but if left unaddressed, they build up over time. Eventually, your body starts speaking louder, through pain, fatigue, or even a growing discomfort with intimacy. And yet, these physical changes are only one piece of the puzzle. Because behind every habit, especially the quiet, private ones, is an emotional thread, a reason, a feeling we're trying to soothe, or maybe even avoid. So what happens when masturbation becomes less about pleasure and more about escape? That's when things get even more complicated. Stress relief or stress cycle. One afternoon, I got a phone call from a concerned daughter. Her father, Thomas, was 69 and had recently lost his wife. She told me he was withdrawing, skipping his walks, ignoring calls, spending more time alone. When I saw Thomas, he brushed off her concerns. "I'm fine," he said. "Just need some time to myself. It helps me relax." But as we talked more openly, he shared something deeper. He had begun masturbating daily, sometimes more than once, especially in the evenings when the loneliness felt heavier. "It calms me down," he told me, "makes the nights feel shorter." And I understood that. I really did. For many older adults, especially after a significant loss, the nights are long. The silence becomes suffocating, and the absence of touch can feel like a hole that nothing seems to fill. Orgasm, even when experienced alone, triggers the release of oxytocin and dopamine, chemicals that soothe, relax, and bring temporary peace. But what Thomas didn't realize, and what I've seen happen to many of my patients, is that what starts as a coping tool can quietly turn into a coping trap. Instead of helping you work through sadness, it numbs it. Instead of motivating connection, it replaces it. And the calm it brings, it fades quickly, leaving behind a deeper emotional void and a growing dependence on a private routine. It's a subtle cycle, one that feels comforting in the moment, but slowly erodes your sense of purpose, presence, and emotional peace. We don't talk enough about how coping mechanisms can slip into avoidance, and we definitely don't talk enough about how that avoidance impacts how we show up in our bodies, in our emotions, and in our most important relationships. Because when we start substituting real connection with private habits, it's not just the brain or body that pays the price. It's our relationships, and the consequences of that shift often unfold in silence until it's too late. Relationship strain, the silent distance. There's a couple I remember well, David and Ellen, married 43 years. They didn't come to see me for a medical emergency. They came because something unspoken had begun to take root between them. Ellen described it as distance. David had become quieter, more withdrawn. He wasn't angry or cold, but he wasn't present either. Their intimacy had faded, and so had their emotional closeness. Eventually, after some honest and gentle discussion, David opened up. Since his retirement, and after some recent health scares, he had started relying on daily masturbation. It's just easier, he told me. Less pressure, less chance of failure. That one statement changed everything. You see, for many older couples, especially those with a deep, shared history, solo habits aren't just about sex. They're about what those habits replace. When masturbation becomes the main outlet for sexual energy, it often creates a quiet erosion of intimacy. Touch becomes less frequent. Conversations about needs and connection grow uncomfortable. Over time, the emotional glue that held the relationship together begins to wear thin. And here's the part that breaks my heart. Most of it happens in silence. Not because either person stopped caring, but because they don't know how to bring it up. There's shame, confusion, guilt. So the distance grows, not from anger, but from avoidance. I've seen this kind of emotional drift lead to resentment, loneliness, and even heartbreak between two people who still loved each other deeply. It wasn't a lack of love. It was a lack of honest conversation, masked by habit and quiet discomfort. When sexual energy is turned inward day after day, it sends an unspoken message. I don't need you. And over time, even if those words are never spoken, that message sinks in. It changes the dynamic. It wounds connection. But there's another influence at play here, one that's far more pervasive than most people realize. One that's reshaping expectations, rewiring arousal patterns, and redefining what many people believe intimacy should look like. And it's not just a private issue anymore. It's a digital one, sitting quietly on millions of screens, day after day. Pornography, a hidden influence with lasting effects. A few years ago, I saw a man in his early 70s. We'll call him Roy. He was frustrated, embarrassed, and deeply confused. He said everything worked fine when he was alone. But when he was with his wife, something felt off. I just don't feel much anymore, he admitted. It's not her. It's me. I don't know what's wrong. What Roy didn't mention at first, but eventually shared, is that he had been regularly watching pornography. Not obsessively, not excessively by today's standards, but enough that it had become part of his routine. And over time, it had changed something in him. As we continued our conversation, Roy finally shared the full picture. He'd been using pornography almost daily. It started out harmless, just something to pass the time after retirement, a way to unwind. But over time, it became a routine. And now, he struggled to feel anything during real-life intimacy. This isn't rare. In fact, I hear stories like Roy's far more often than you might think. You see, pornography, especially when paired with daily masturbation, can gradually reshape how the brain responds to arousal. It conditions us to crave overstimulation, fast, exaggerated, and emotionally detached. Eventually, real connection starts to feel muted by comparison. But the toll isn't just physical, it's emotional. Many older adults turn to pornography not from lust, but from something much deeper: loneliness, grief, or boredom, or even unresolved pain. It becomes a way to escape, not just from stress, but from the ache of being unseen or untouched. But rather than healing that wound, porn often numbs it. And the more it's used, the more it replaces real comfort, real connection, real shared experience. It becomes a substitute, not just for intimacy, but for identity. People begin to question their desires, their worth, even their ability to connect with others, not because they want to withdraw, but because they've forgotten how not to. So how do you know when the habit has crossed a line? How do you recognize when your body and mind are quietly asking for help, even if you're not ready to say it out loud? That's what we need to talk about next. Warning signs you should never ignore. Not long ago, I met a patient named Linda. She was 66 and came in feeling low, not quite depressed, but detached. "I just feel like I'm drifting," she said. "Like something's missing." Her sleep was inconsistent, her energy was low, and the things she once loved doing, they didn't spark joy anymore. As we talked, she gently shared that she had started masturbating daily, sometimes to help her fall asleep, sometimes just to fill the silence. She felt a little embarrassed afterward, but couldn't quite explain why. And that's when I started paying closer attention. Because what Linda described, those are some of the quiet red flags I've learned to look for. When you feel the urge to do it, not because you want to, but because you have to, that's a signal. When it starts interfering with how you sleep, think, or connect with others, that's a red flag. When the feeling afterward is one of sadness, shame, or emptiness, that's not something to ignore. And if you're keeping it a secret, not just from your partner, but from yourself, it may be time to ask, why? These signs don't show up like loud alarms. They whisper. They slip in gradually, through fatigue, withdrawal, or a fading sense of joy. But they matter, because they're your body and mind's way of saying, something's out of balance. The good news, once you recognize the pattern, you can begin to shift it. And that brings us to the most important part of this conversation: how to restore peace without shame and reclaim balance without fear. How to reclaim balance and peace. I'll never forget a moment I had with a woman named Margaret. She was 70, graceful, thoughtful, and deeply honest. She looked at me and said, "I don't want to give it up entirely. I just don't want it to run my life anymore." That stuck with me, because that's what this is really about. Not shame, not guilt, but choice, awareness, balance. For many older adults, masturbation becomes more than a release. It becomes a ritual of escape. But healing doesn't come from quitting cold turkey or punishing yourself. It starts with curiosity and compassion. Ask yourself, What am I really looking for when I do this? Is it physical release or emotional relief? Is it connection or a way to quiet something I don't want to feel? If the habit is taking more than it gives, there are gentle ways to shift back into balance. Set a rhythm that respects your energy rather than draining it. Replace overstimulation with something nourishing, like walking outside, calling someone you care about, or reading something that feeds your soul. Bring back touch, not just sexual, but human. Hugs, holding hands, sitting beside someone without needing to speak. Talk to someone, a doctor, a therapist, a friend. Silence keeps us stuck. Conversation moves us forward. And remember, small shifts matter. Every moment you choose connection over isolation. Every time you listen to your body with kindness instead of criticism, that's healing. That's growth. You are not broken. You are adapting. You are remembering who you are. Beyond the habit. Beyond the cycle. Conclusion. A final word from the doctor. Over the years, I've sat across from countless men and women, people just like you, who carried quiet questions they didn't know how to ask. They weren't looking for permission. They were looking for peace, for clarity, for a way to understand what their bodies and hearts were trying to say. We've talked today about how the brain's reward system can get overstimulated, how physical habits once meant for relief can become sources of stress, how our relationships and self-worth can quietly erode without us even noticing. But this conversation has always been about more than just science. It's about aging with intention, not shame, with awareness, not avoidance. So if there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this. Masturbation is not the enemy, but the patterns we build around it, the reasons we turn to it, the things it quietly replaces. Those are worth examining. Because your time, your energy, your connection to others, those are sacred. You are not too old to feel joy. You are not too far gone to feel change. And it is never too late to rewrite your story. With compassion, with clarity, and with choice. So as you move forward, I invite you to keep asking yourself, is this habit bringing me closer to the life I want, or pulling me quietly away from it? This conversation may have started with one private question. But the answers? They reach deep. They touch everything. Thank you for spending this time with me. Stay curious. Stay kind to yourself. And above all, stay connected to your health, to your truth, and to the people who matter most.